So one of the things that I find really fascinating about video games is when they're based on historical themes, you can use them to try and study what the past was like. And the way I think that you can best do that is by thinking about this idea I call historical problem spaces. So I want to introduce you to this idea of historical problem spaces. It's kind of a fancy term, but it doesn't mean anything particularly difficult. Basically, we're talking about anytime you have people somewhere trying to solve problems, you have a problem space. And if it's in the past, then it's a historical problem space. So, what you watching right now, you probably have some goals that you want to achieve. You're in an environment where there are things that can help you and not help you. We kind of work like this every day, all of us. And we forget that people in the past really had their own goals, and they had tools that could help them, and they had obstacles that stood in their way. Now, let's get to simulation games. The reason simulation games are such a great way to learn about historical problem spaces is a good simulation game, good historical simulation game, is a problem space in and of itself. I should define a couple of terms. First of all, a simulation game, the way I use it in my book Game in the Past, and the way I still like to use it, is a game that is representing in some way, shape, or form the past in reasonable ways. You have agents with roles and goals, they have affordances and constraints, and they make strategies and choices based on those. They want to achieve their goals. It shouldn't take too much to see that that's a really good description of a historical simulation game. Let me give you some examples. So you could take the Stronghold simulation game series. Each of these games is based on the idea that you build a medieval manor, and you have to manage your peasants, and you have to manage your defenses, and you're building all sorts of buildings with different functions on the manor. And you'll find these rulers presented themselves as connected to the gods, either as chief priests or simply as the lead person in that society, and therefore the gods had picked them to rule. We see this in a lot of places. So one of the questions you can ask yourself, though, if you're studying the past is, did they see their closeness to the gods as a strategy? Or did they see showing their closeness to the gods as a goal? In the one case, if showing their closeness to the gods is a strategy, we might view them as very cynical, perhaps not religious at all, and simply trying to manipulate people's beliefs. But on the other hand, if showing closeness to the gods is a goal, perhaps that's just something they value in its own right. There's no reason other than that they think it's true. Having students play through these historical possibilities is a great exercise. What you're doing is you're being placed in a situation where you have to make choices. And that's what the power of a historical simulation space is. It gets students thinking about choices. And when I say students, I mean any of us who are trying to understand the past. We too often see these things as fixed in place in history. Too often we see the past as predetermined. It had to happen the way it did, and the study of the past is just the study of what people did and what the effects were, and there's no fluidity there. But every time we look at the past, we're studying real people with real lives who had choices in front of them, and the past didn't have to turn out the way it did. And this represents how we should be thinking of the past in the real world, as people who made choices given the resources that were around them, and as people who might have made different decisions if the resources were different or their knowledge was different. And this leads us to a richer, deeper understanding of the past that's dynamic. It's not fixed. It's a bunch of players trying to achieve their goals with the best tools that they have.